Hello, I'm back with a new guide video. Today I will talk about radicals, loyalists, and standard of living. This is like basic concept in the game that I think a lot of people don't really understand because it doesn't really work maybe like the way it works in real life. So let's just talk first. How does loyalist and standard of living and all of this work in real life? In real life, there are like different kind of country clubs. For example, the what we call the West, like USA and the European Union and so on. All of them have a good developed economies and a good standard of living, and because they have such a high standard of living, the people in these countries are very loyal, basically. And so, for example, any country in real life, any country in Africa or like most parts of Asia, not the rich parts like China, Japan, and Korea and so on. They are like as rich as in Europe, but like India or Indonesia, all these people, like they have more radicals here, especially here in the Middle East, where there it's like a really low standard of living, and all the oil money is like it's stolen from the people, and only like the to a few rich, often like a government, they have stolen all the money. So there's a few rich people and everyone else is very poor. And in real life, it works like that everyone from Africa would like to move to European Union or to United States just because they would have like to have a better life, basically. But in this game, loyalist and radical doesn't work like that high standard of living doesn't automatically give you lots of loyalists. So in this game, what is important, if in this game, it's do you raise the standard of living or was it lowered? So if you raise the standard of living, you get more loyalists, and if you lower the standard of living, you get less loyalists and more radicals. And one radical and one loyalist, they take out each other. So that is one way in this game how you get how you get it. Like it's the difference from the week before, if it was up or down in standard of living, that's important, and that's very important for the gameplay mechanics I will talk about later in this video. The other thing you have to know about loyalist, radicals, and standard of living, it is that people that are being discriminated, like I'm playing as Russia now, and we see that apparently we have apparently there are people here in the Caucasus, in the region of Kuban and Dagestan, and like turmoil gives radical. So turmoil gives radical, and you often get turmoil. It's a little bit of like turmoil is gotten from radical POVs. So radical POVs gives turmoil, basically, and often it's that could be because of different reasons. So it's I might have said wrong before, but it's radical people that gives turmoil, but turmoil is so it's also a sign like something is wrong here, and quite often it's because it might be so that people are being discriminated. So discrimination is one factor to get radicals, and you can easily see who in your country are being discriminated. It's decided by this law, the citizen law, and this one is a little bit hard to understand, but I will try to explain it in easier terms. So Russia now, we have national supremacy. So it says cultures will be accepted, and if they are accepted, they are not being discriminated. if they shares a heritage cultural trait with any primary culture in their country. And then this is what is confusing. Shares a cultural trait which is not a heritage cultural trait with any primary cultures. So it's easier to go here to the population and go to the culture screen, and we can see Russia. They are our main pop, so they're not being discriminated, of course. And you can see this basically this star here means that they are not being discriminated. And for example, Ukrainian is not being discriminated because they are European, of European heritage and East Slavic, so they share both of these. And if I'm just gonna show here again, national supremacy means that it needs to share both. If we go to the next step, which is the racial segregation, it's enough if it shares a heritage cultural trait with any primary cultures, and that means that Russian is of the European heritage. So if we would have that law, we would not discriminate any European pop. And if we would go and do next level, which is cultural exclusion, then if it shares any cultural trait with any primary cultures, so if we go back here, then it would be enough, like all East Slavic. For example, if there is, let's say, maybe there would be East Slavic people somewhere here, then we would not discriminate them either, even if they are Europeans. So let's see, for example, here the Kazakh people, like they would still be discriminated, for they are Central Asian and Iranian. But if they would be East Slavic, then we would not discriminate them. So just for Russia, it wouldn't be so much difference, because I think every East Slavic nation is also a European nation. So these two wouldn't change so much. And of course, multiculturalism is the best one, but it's hard to get for two reasons. Every interested group used to hate multiculturalism, but then basically you accept everyone. So it's the best one by far in this game, and it doesn't have any negatives. But it's hard to implement. You need this tech, the human rights tech, which is a level 4 tech, and it's also hard to implement because interest groups hate it. But for Russia, racial segregation would be the best, and we would accept all from Europe. And you can see it also gives this one: radical from standard of living decreases in accepted cultures, and loyalists from standard of living increases in accepted cultures is better the fewer people you don't discriminate. And these ones is very important for the strategy that I will be explaining shortly. So that's something that we need to know. And another way that we get loyalists and radicals, it is because of the political movements. We don't have any political movements or agitators, but for example, if we would invite this guy, he would like to enact a presidential republic, and then there would be he would be building support for that one. And when there is a lot of support for a law change, then when we implement that law change, those people that support this one will become loyalists. So that's one way. If there is something that you want to do in the future, a good way is to get an agitator and build support for that. The risk is, of course, that if an interest group gets below 20, they will become below 10, then they will become radicalized. So an interest group with below 10 in approval will become radicalized, and they will get more radicals, and sooner or later try to make their case to implement some reforms, and it could even go so long as it will become a revolution. One way also that's important is this one, the righteous government. And you want a righteous government because this one gives, as you can see here, 33% loyalists from standard of living increases. So a righteous government is very important for, and if you have a bad government, you get less, you get more radicals. So you want to have this one as high as possible. That's often not so easily, but you can see here that Russia is trying to suppress, this is how you start at Russia, they try to suppress the intelligentsia, and the reason is that as they are playing right now, I'm not saying this is a good way, but they want only have the landowners in government to get a high righteous government, basically. So the last important one, how you can get a lot of loyalists and radicals, it's about different kind of journal entries and the different kinds, which is kind of like missions. For example, this law here, this is a very important one. The Corn Law is like a stepping stone for developing nations like Russia, who has, if we look at our laws here, we are a huge country with a large military, but our laws are bad. We're using traditionalism, which is the worst economical law, and mercantilism, it's the worst trade law, and we're also using serfdom, which is the worst land reform law. So all of these, before Russia can prosper and become a rich society, we will need to reform all of these laws. But that will, the landowners, who are the strongest one, they like all those laws because they own their big farms, and they want to keep it like it is. And one way to start the reform is by completing or working on this, which is known as the Corn Laws. And to have this one, you would need a grain price more expensive than 25% at base price. And if we look here at Russia, our grain price is -7%, so it's not there yet, but it might be in the future. And one way to do it is, and after that you should do this encourage exports, which is basically needed to trigger this event. And what this Corn Laws event does, it does two things. There is an event that gives an agitator, that's the landowner, and he supports free trade and market liberalism and reforms. And if you're lucky, then either he might become an agitator, and maybe he will argue for free trade, laissez-faire, tenant farmers, or something like that, some kind of positive reform. And if you're lucky, when the leader of the landowners, this guy, he's a traditionalist, and when he dies or retires or quits, then if you're lucky, that market liberal landowner can get in charge, and then they would like to do the economic reforms needed to raise the standard of living. And once you have managed to do all those reforms, first then it's like impossible or meaningful to try to raise the standard of living and get loyalists that way. The reason you would want loyalists is because loyalists gives approval to all of these groups. You can see you get approval from different kind. If you have a lot of loyalists, maybe this will get +5 loyalists to all these groups if you have a very loyal society, and that would activate these kind of better cards. Like everyone has a negative card, a happy card, and one that's called a very happy card. It's +10. If +10, then that is activated. And these cards are very powerful, so you want the positive cards. And one more reason that's even more important than to activate these cards is that if everyone is happy, then you can put in the laws that you want. For example, now if I would try to get rid of serfdom and get homesteading, you can see here -20 from the landowners, and they will get radicalized. So before I could do this reform, I would need they get -12 and then they will do a revolution. So I would need to increase it by 4. I'm looking down here, so let's see if I can show it to you where I'm looking here. I would need this one to be 4 more. So if it was from or 3 more, so if it would be +11 now, then it would get -9, and then they would not be radicalized. And if they're not radicalized, they won't start a movement or a revolution to keep the serfdom law that they like. So if it's not worth it right now to try to increase the standard of living, like what should be your strategy now for a country like Russia? And I think the best strategy here is, because we can't, like it would be because of the bad laws, it would be kind of meaningless to try to keep low taxes and try to get some loyalists and so on. So I think instead one method would be to which is kind of like how these autocratic countries did in real life. And it is like, you can see they are trying like a low taxation level to try to get more happy people. But I would say it's probably better to do a lot of taxation, maybe slash the wages and put in a lot of taxes here, or something like that. And of course this will create a lot of radicals. But it would give me, you see 130, it would give me the possibility to build a lot of new construction and like build up the economy. And when you get a lot of, if we look here at the building registry, let's just look at, let's just look at the building in Russia. We can see that we mainly have subsistence farms, and these are like the peasants that work on their own farms. And then we have manor houses, and these manor houses, they are owning the subsistence farms, and these ones are aristocrats mainly, and they is the one that is part of the landowners. And then we also have some, but we don't have many buildings. So for example, the lodging camps, this is kind of other kind of people that have different ideology and politics, and so you need to like build up more buildings, different kind of buildings, to get the peasants out of the subsistence farms and, for example, put them in modern wheat farms instead. Then you can see here that in a wheat farm, a lot of them are farmers, and farmers, they are not just laborers working on a big farm owned by a manor house. Instead, this is like your homesteading farmers that own their own property, and they can also save, like they sell their goods on a market and get the money and can invest like in that. So that's just a more modern way of farming. So my point here is that it's not really worth it to try to get a lot of loyalists. Maybe we could just like lower taxes, but because our laws are so bad, it's just not worth it right now. So we should try to modernize the laws before we get the loyalists. And one way because this one will go down. This one will go down, and we will get more radicals, and it will go down because the high taxes, you can see it gets more radicals, and so on. One way to counter this is to get some kind of an institution here. We don't have an institution yet, but there are some institutions, for example the police force here, which is also something that the landowners want to implement. If we have for example this one dedicated police force, then you can see every level gets -5% radical from standard of living decreases. So if this one would be at let's say level 3, then we would get 50% less radicals from standard of living decreases. So it would be good to get as few radicals as possible, even when the standard of living is low. And why is it good to get a low standard of living? It's because after the liberals reforms are done in your country, then let's see standard of living is at 6. Then when we lower taxes, then it would be easy to raise the standard of living, and then we would get a lot of loyalists. So because as I said in the beginning, it's not the level of the standard of living like it is in real life that gives you loyalists, but it's the change from the week before. So if you go from a very low standard of living like 6 to 7, that will create like a huge amount of loyalists. And also, if people are unhappy with the current government, they will also start to demand reforms, and you can implement those reforms and get loyalists that way. And another important one is that there are several events that you want to use. For example, this corn law event, it makes all laborers in the country 10% more loyal, and that's for such a large country, that's a lot. And there are a few very important that gives very big modifiers that you should try to use. Let's see if I can have it here. For example, this one, I think this one, urbanize Russia. I think this one gives plus 20% increased loyalists from standard of living increases for 5 years. So once you complete this one, which will take a while, but once it's done, it's time to lower taxes and use this 20% extra as a leverage to push up the loyalists. And for many of these, I call them a developing nation that has maybe serfdom, slavery, and bad economic laws, such as maybe I have some series on my YouTube channel with Ottoman Empire, Russia, and Japan, where I take these kind of countries that start with poor laws and use this strategy to get very successful empires. You can see that if you want the details, but the things to remember from this video is: 1, loyalists and radicals counter each other. It's not the level here, but it's the increase or decrease from the previous level that's important. And you can get loyalists by building up, by getting like agitators and building up support for political reforms, and then when you implement the reforms, you get loyalists. And you should, once you have improved your laws and gotten better economic, trade laws and land reform laws, so you can start generating real wealth in your country and increase the standard of living. That is why when you should start to lower taxes and reap the benefit of having a loyal population. So yeah, that's my quick tutorial about loyalists and standard of living. So see you in next tutorial.